Deep cover. It is the most dangerous assignment in the history of warfare. You do not just visit the enemy, you move in with them. You eat their food. You laugh at their jokes. You serve their king. You have to be so convincing that your new masters trust you with their lives, while you hide a secret that would get you executed in a heartbeat. The psychological toll is shattering. You have to lie every single time you open your mouth. You have to wear a mask so tight that sometimes you forget what your real face looks like. We left David standing on a hill, realizing that King Saul, the man he spared twice, was fundamentally broken. Saul was addicted to his own paranoia. David knew the relapse was coming, and he decided he was done playing the victim. So, the Shepherd King made a choice that looked like madness to everyone around him. He didn't run further into the caves. He walked straight into the mouth of the beast. He defected. He marched his 600 men and their families right into Gath, the capital city of the Philistines, the hometown of Goliath. He looked King Achish in the eye and convinced him that he was a traitor to Israel. Achish looked at David and didn't see a giant slayer. He saw an asset. He gave David a frontier town called Ziklag. For 16 months, Ziklag became David's fortress. But the price of safety was high. To keep his cover, David had to become a monster. King Achish expected David to earn his keep. He expected David to raid the towns of Judah. And when David returned from his raids, Achish would ask, "Who did you hit today?" David would lie. He would say, "Oh, we hit the south of Judah." But in reality, he was pivoting south and slaughtering Israel's ancient enemies, the Jeshurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites. But here is the dark reality of deep cover. If David left a single survivor, one prisoner, one escaped child, that person could run to Gath and tell the king the truth. The cover would be blown. David and his families would be dead. So, the Bible gives us a chilling detail. David did not leave a man or woman alive. This was total war, a scorched-earth policy born of absolute desperation. It worked too well. King Achish said, "He has made himself a stench to his people Israel. Therefore he shall be my servant always." Achish thought he owned David. He thought David was trapped. But the trap was about to snap shut on David. The drums of war began to beat. But this wasn't a skirmish. This was the big one. The Philistines gathered all 5 armies for a massive invasion to wipe out Saul once and for all. King Achish turned to his favorite mercenary and said, "You are coming with me, you and your men." David was cornered. If he said no, his cover was blown and Achish would kill him. If he said yes, he would find himself on the battlefield opposite Jonathan, opposite his countrymen. He would be forced to fight against the God of Israel. David marched out with the Philistine army, heading toward the battle of Gilboa. He was marching toward treason. He was hours away from destroying his destiny. And then God intervened, not with a lightning bolt, but with the jealousy of bureaucrats. The other Philistine lords saw David and his rough-looking Hebrews marching in the rear guard, and they lost their minds. They stopped the whole procession. "What are these Hebrews doing here?" they demanded. Achish tried to defend him, but the generals weren't buying it. They said, "Send this man back. If we get into the heat of battle, he will turn on us to buy back his master's favor." They were right. That is exactly what David would have done. Achish was embarrassed. He apologized to David and sent him home. It was a humiliation, but it was a divine bailout. God used the hatred of his enemies to save him from sinning against his friends. So, David and his men turned around. They marched 3 long days back to Ziklag. They were exhausted. They were relieved. They were going home to their wives, their beds, and their children. They crested the final hill, expecting to see the smoke of cooking fires. Instead, they saw the smoke of ruin. Silence. That was the first thing that hit them. No dogs barking. No children playing. While the cat was away, the rats came out to play. The Amalekites, the very people David had been raiding, had circled back. They found Ziklag undefended. They burned the city to the ground. And they took everyone. The text says they killed no one, small or great, but carried them off. David's 2 wives? Gone. The wives and children of his 600 tough, battle-hardened soldiers? Gone. Everything they had built, everything they had protected, vanished in a puff of smoke. This was the breaking point. These 600 men were the toughest warriors in the region. They had faced armies, giants, and starvation. But this broke them. The Bible says they wept until they had no more strength to weep. Imagine the sound of 600 warriors screaming in grief. It was a primal, terrifying sound. And then the grief turned to rage. The men looked at David, the leader, the one who brought them to Gath, the one who left the city undefended to play politics with Achish. They thought, "This is your fault." Whispers rippled through the sobbing crowd. "Stone him." It was a mutiny. David was standing alone in the ashes of his life. His family was gone. His property was destroyed. His career was in shambles. And his best friend were picking up rocks to execute him. This was rock bottom. There was no Samuel here to anoint him, no Jonathan to encourage him. He was completely, utterly alone. And this was the moment that made him king. The text gives us one of the most powerful sentences in the entire Old Testament. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. He didn't give a speech. He didn't fight back. He didn't beg. He turned inward and upward. He remembered the lion. He remembered the bear. He remembered Goliath. He remembered that his identity wasn't commander or husband or father. It was servant of Yahweh. He stopped the panic. He found the priest. He asked for the ephod. He didn't ask, "Why me?" He asked for orders. "Shall I pursue this troop? Shall I overtake them?" And God answered, "Pursue, for you shall surely overtake them and shall surely rescue." The switch flipped. The tears stopped. The warlord was back. The chase was on. They ran so hard, so fast, that 200 of the men collapsed at the brook Besor. They physically could not take another step. David didn't berate them. He left them to guard the baggage and pushed on with the 400 strongest. But the desert is vast. The Amalekites could be anywhere. Then, they stumbled upon a half-dead man lying in a field. An Egyptian. He was starving and dehydrated. David's men wanted to keep moving, but David stopped. He fed the man. He gave him water. It turned out, this man was a slave of an Amalekite. When he got sick 3 days ago, his master left him in the dirt to die, because that Amalekite didn't have the decency to treat his slave with humanity. He handed David the key to his own destruction. The Egyptians said, "I can take you to them." They found the Amalekite camp at twilight. It was a scene of revelry. They were celebrating, eating, drinking, and dancing amidst the piles of loot they stole. They thought they were safe. They thought the Lion of Judah was miles away. David hit them like a hurricane. The battle lasted from twilight until the evening of the next day. It was a massacre. David's 400 exhausted, angry men cut through the Amalekite horde. And here's the miracle. They found the women, unharmed. They found the children, terrified but safe. They found the livestock. Not a single hoof was missing. David recovered all. The march back to the brook Besor was a victory parade. But trouble was brewing again. The 400 men who fought started looking at the 200 men who stayed behind because they were too tired. They didn't bleed, the fighters said. They don't get the loot. They can have their wives back, but the gold? That's ours. It was the logic of the world. Survival of the fittest. But David stepped in. He looked at these greedy men and he shut it down. He established a law that would stand in Israel for generations. "No, my brothers," he said. "The share of the man who went down into the battle shall be the same as the share of the man who stayed by the supplies. They shall share alike." David recognized something profound. Unity is more valuable than gold. In David's kingdom, you are not punished for your weakness. You are covered by the strength of your brothers. He took it even further. When he got back to Ziklag, he took the massive spoils of war, and he sent gifts to the elders of Judah, to his friends in the south, to the very people he was supposed to be ruling one day. He was done hiding. He was done playing the double agent. David stood in Ziklag, surrounded by his recovered family and his loyal men. He had survived the lion's den of Gath. He had survived the moral abyss of the raids. He had survived the total loss of his home and the mutiny of his friends. He had been folded, hammered, and put through the fire again. And he had emerged not just as a survivor, but as a monarch. But as the sun set over Ziklag, the sky to the north was dark with storm clouds. Up in Jezreel, on the slopes of Mount Gilboa, The armies of the Philistines were arrayed against the shivering, terrified forces of King Saul. Saul was alone. He had killed his priests. He had driven away his best warrior. He had ignored his God, and now the bill had come due. Next time, on Bible Hero Saga, we witness the end of an era. The tragic, bloody fall of the first king of Israel, and the moment the crown finally passes to the shepherd.